And because of the quality of the opposition, while the Australia had that space to test out like the super high pressing and a very high pressing game near to the Nepalese goal line, but because of the weakness of the opposition, the defense was never tested. Shihan had nothing to do. Diuji spent more time going forward, as I mentioned earlier, so they cobbled on. Arif Aiman could switch between left and right, and Faisal Halim could even come on. Peter Cklamovski's first game in charge of Malaysia was a success as the hosts comfortably dispatched Nepal 2-0 in their opening Asian Cup final round qualifier at home at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium earlier tonight. And this match was supposed to be played in the capital of Nepal, Kathmandu, but because the stadium did not meet the requirements by FIFA and AFC, so it was agreed for both nations to swap the fixtures around. So that's why Malaysia ended up playing their opening qualifier at home instead of travelling. Still, it was a very comfortable win from the outset by the Harimau Malaya, who welcomed their usual stalwarts and Faisal Halim back to their fold after a rather disastrous ASEAN Championship campaign with a second string squad. So the usual suspects returned, and unsurprisingly many of them started this game. Because if we look at the starting 11 that Cklamovski picked for his first international match in charge, only two survivors were in the starting 11 for Harimau Malaya. They were Selangor defender Harif Haikal and Ho Chi Minh City attacking midfielder Endrick Dos Santos. The rest of the usual suspects like Dion Kuz, Matthew Davis, Lavaya Coben Ong, Shihan Azmi, Noor Lain, Arif Aiman, and Romel Morales, they all returned back to the starting 11. And there is actually a new face in this setup. The Portuguese-based midfielder Hector Havel, who only recently obtained his Malaysian citizenship, and he partnered in midfield alongside Lane in the middle of the park. And the formation that Cklamovski put up was also, you can say, it gives us an indication on how he would like Harimau Malaya under him to be playing. And it's a rather, I think by Malaysian standards, a little unusual, although they probably had done it before under previous coaches, including Kim Panggon. Pau Marty kept insisting on the back four, so he's one of the rare exceptions. But in this case, for Cklamovski starting 11, it was a centre-back trio of Harif Haikal in the middle of three, alongside with Sharusat and Matthew Davis, both from Johor Darul Takzim, on the left and right centre-back roles respectively, with, unsurprisingly, Corbin Ong taking the left wing-back role. But I think for the first time in his international career with Malaysia, Dion Kuz goes back to his more natural position playing at right wing back, or rather he usually plays at right back at club level even when he was previously playing in Europe. But this time round he was playing as a right wing back. Then I already mentioned the centre midfield duo. Then you have the front three of Endrick as left forward, Arif Aiman as the right side forward, and Romel Morales as the centre forward. So it was rather straightforward as it went. And what we saw was more like a extended practice game for Cklamovski's side, considering that they had not played any friendly game throughout those 8 days when they had their training camp in Johor Bahru. So the Nepal game is the first game to see how Harimau Malaya will adapt under his training and tactical setup. And Nepal came into this game coming off a reserve shock 1-0 win over Singapore last Friday. It was a deserved win because for some reason Singapore were very off colour that day against a Nepal side that had something to prove, having lost 3 previous head-to-head meetings in the 1980s, and with that result, it was the first time that the Nepalese actually defeated Singapore 1-0 with a deserved all-round performance. And they thought that probably Malaysia would be similar to how Singapore played when it came to this qualifier. Unfortunately, it was really mistaken, as Nepal went back to form of being the minors in this group, where in the other group game earlier, where Vietnam trashed Laos 5-0. So that aside, we delve deeper into the game because Nepal would have expected Malaysia to be rather passive, or would appear to be a little weakened, because they settled with Singapore as a similar type of opponent in the friendly game. But turns out it was Nepal who found themselves at the back foot and at the wrong end of, you can say it's a very textbook performance, a dominant win. That Malaysia didn't have to go all out to try and force the goal or force an outcome. And already early on, Malaysia have shown what they wanted to do, with Arif Aiman coming quite close, and with Endrick being the real life wire of the team for much of the game. And it did not take them long. It's like they kept attacking Endrick, coming close with a header, and then Arif Aiman having 1 or 2 shots, one volley that actually, you can say, he volleyed over as early as the 3rd minute, and he was a live wire on the right, and with Kuz also playing alongside him on the right wing back, it was pretty much a long night for the visitors, even with the thousands of Gurkhas who could have crossed across the causeway to watch this match, or those Nepalese based in Malaysia coming down to see their compatriots play in the southernmost state of the peninsula. So it was, how do I put it? It was more of a case of attempting damage control for the Nepalese from the get-go, compared to what happened at the National Stadium in Singapore last week. So after, on the 8th minute, Endrick header just over after an Arif Aiman's cross. It was overall pretty straightforward, and Hector Havel didn't, because of the level of the opposition, Hector Havel admittedly isn't really tested as a central midfielder, but he showed what he could do. And I think his displays in training and ability was one of the reasons why Nacho Insa was not included in the matchday squad of 23 players at all. So from what we saw, Hector Havel is pretty comfortable with the ball. He had actually, you can say his vision is pretty good by Southeast Asian standards, and his ability to spot players in differing roles where his reading is miles ahead of many of those locally based, local born players, because this new face has had a hand in both goals that led to a very comfortable routine win. And for the first goal, it was actually through an Arif Aiman low cross, or as usual how Arif likes to do at club level. He at least reprised it, in this case, this time in international football, without much difficulty. Admittedly, Nepal were always on the back foot. They were always caught off guard. They even resorted to fouls, but it was generally an easy, comfortable night for Arif Aiman. He didn't have to run or stretch as hard as he would normally have done in the AFC Champions League matches, or even in the Malaysian Super League. for none of these Nepalese actually really play abroad apart from Rohit Chan, who still plies his trade in Indonesia, but majority of them play in the domestic Nepalese league. So it was very comfortable for them, for Arif to just run to the goal line and then provide that cutting cross, and it was one of these cutting crosses that found Havel, and he just took a chance on the edge of the box and scored. And I think for many of the Malaysian audience to miss this goal was a travesty. Really, it was a travesty. It's like RTM Sukan could have done better when it comes to damage control. It's like when the footage was suddenly cut off in the 25th, 26th or 27th minute, and it stood for a while until when the presenter suddenly mentioned that there was a goal, and we had not even had an idea what exactly happened, not even during the halftime break. It was only after the match when we saw the highlights, then we saw that goal that Hector Havel scored on his international debut. So on that front, I think RTM Sukan can do better in this regard when it comes to the loss of transmission during those critical minutes, because sometimes you never know whether a goal will have been scored, like what actually happened. So coming back, so with that goal, it was more like a one-way traffic for throughout the game. And how do I put it? It's like the surprising part of Yongku's being able to play in his usual role, where he had previously been doing at club level, was, you can say, it allowed him to bomb forward a lot more. He spent a lot more time in the Nepal half than in his own half. Such was the passivity of the Nepalese. They rarely offered much of a threat. They did not test any of the centre backs. They did not test the starting goalkeeper, Shian Azmi. I think if Cklamovski had wanted to change the goalkeeper, he could, but I think partially common sense did prevail in a way. But Shian Azmi could just consume a few makan, could have read a book, or could have just chatted with the crowd behind, but it would not have made much of a difference, because the Nepalese were generally not threatening in front of at his goal tonight. And how do I put it? Then in the second half, I think it came to a point where the second half became like you can say a training game. I know it's an actual Asian Cup qualifier, but the way the game played out, it allowed Cklamovski to do a few things, like what we noticed in the second half, where once again Malaysia were dominant, Nepal were digging in deep, and this time round, I think what we noticed in the second half was the Malaysian players really playing on a very high line, where they press the Nepalese inside their own first third, and it made the Nepalese panic more, because already struggling with the variation of passes, trying to rob the ball off the Malaysians, who rarely put any foot wrong. Actually, there were no disastrous mistakes from any yellow shirt tonight, and they really, it was almost total control. The play was fluid. It wasn't necessarily the most eye-pleasing, but they more than got the job done, and they did not tire out throughout this whole process. It wasn't like fighting tooth and nail just to get those 3 points. It could have been more, but the high pressing really did make the Nepalese defenders panic quite a lot, resulting to clearing long balls, long clearances, like how an inferior team would do, and where the Nepalese would try to keep playing that low block to see how long they could sustain without conceding another goal. And I think unfortunately in this case, a second goal did come. Again, Arif Aiman with the assist, with Corbin Ong with the easiest of finishes. It wasn't that high stakes, but it was the easiest of finishes. And actually this part, Endrick was one standout player tonight. I mean, we rarely talk about Endrick dos Santos being one of the better players. Admittedly, it's against inferior opposition, but Endrick showed why he remains a valuable option for Harimau Malaya, with especially with that set play. It's like Arif Aiman on the left wing with Endrick on the ball. It could have been just a routine whip into the box and hope that somebody would hit the ball in, but no. It was one of the most well-worked free kicks I ever seen. It's like Endrick to Havel again. Yes, Havel with that vision to split the entire right side of the Nepalese defense by passing that diagonal ball to Arif Aiman, who just cuts in a little bit and provided the low cross for Corbin Ong to just tap the ball into an empty net. The goalkeeper was already caught out. Anybody in Corbin Ong's shoes would have dispatched this ball away for the second goal. It was that simple. It was that easy. Nepal had no answers. I think the police would realize that. Why did we play Singapore? Singapore were not that good, and Singapore unfortunately also drew 0-0 with Hong Kong despite improving their performance. But on the side track, Singapore were really not at the level of Malaysia, when Malaysia turned up to play. Not the Malaysia that showed to be at times tepid under Paul Mati. That was during the ASEAN Championship. That is history. Now it's a new era under Cklamovski, and it was routine, but we get glimpses of how Cklamovski wants Harimau Malaya to play. And because of the quality of the opposition, while Australia has that space to test out like the super high pressing and a very high pressing game near to the Nepalese goal line, but because of the weakness of the opposition, the defense was never tested. Shihan had nothing to do. The Onkus spent more time going forward, as I mentioned earlier, so they Corbin Ong. Arif Aiman could switch between left and right, and Faisal Halim could even come on to replace Endrick. To replace the Onkus in the 74th minute. Such was their superiority. And again, Faisal Halim still managed to do something with a dribble, cut across, but the passing, the sharpness was still not exactly there. But granted, it's still Nepal anyway. When you play the minor, sometimes it's a bit about doing what you can, but not over exerting to the point where it's either a do or die clash. So Malaysia did enough to secure the win. A good start for Peter Cklamovski, for his Harimau Malaya men, and they can look forward to June's next qualifier, where they again play at home, this time against group leaders Vietnam, who trashed Laos. But this time round, because Cklamovski did not have a friendly game, which on hindsight, the Malaysian fans would have been complaining that, why are there no friendly games? But on hindsight, perhaps because of the level of Nepal as opposition, and when the real Harimau Malaya turned up to play, just play, not playing above themselves or fighting tooth and nail for the ball or giving sliding tackles, it's just a routine game, then this result is unsurprising, it's expected, and at least all the players can break camp in a happier mood. And for the Muslim players, they can actually wrap up this international window towards the end of the Ramadan window in a good mood also, because a win, 3 points in the bag, a good start to the final round Asian Cup qualifying campaign, and Hari Raya Idul Fitri to look forward to. So it's a very overall productive, happy camp that left Sultan Ibrahim with smiles, and I think the holidays to look forward to before the league season resumes, before the Malaysia Cup final for the Johor players, and I think for the rest is also to complete the rest of the domestic league season. And it's heartwarming to see Faisal Halim come back to the Harimau Malaya fold after close to a year out of action after the acid attack. So all in all, a good day, a productive day out. Although against Vietnam, I think Cklamovski may find out more questions what he needed to solve rather than a routine one-sided game. I think he might have preferred that. But we wouldn't know whether Cklamovski would also want to arrange a friendly in the June window to prepare for the game against Vietnam, because Vietnam are of much sterner staff than Nepal. And with that, I wrap it up. I wrap this pleasing opener in the Asian Cup qualifiers.